In February of 2015, a new musical hit Broadway, the likes of which had never been seen before. Hamilton, an American musical. The musical portrayed the biography of Alexander Hamilton, a man who is, on the one hand, ubiquitously recognized as the face of the $10 bill, and on the other hand, a founding father most of us know nothing about. The show explores Hamilton's life and career as a general in the Revolutionary War and as the first Secretary of the Treasury. But the curious choice of subject and the historicity of the musical are not the only things that make the show stand out. Its pied de resistance is that the musical depicts Alexander Hamilton's life through hip-hop and rap music, performed by a completely multicultural cast. Hamilton's composer, lyricist, and star actor, Lin-Manuel Miranda, does not merely borrow the musical genres of hip-hop and rap and force Hamilton's story into them. The play illustrates that Alexander Hamilton may actually, loosely speaking, have had more in common with today's rappers than today's politicians. Hamilton was raised in abject poverty. He had a deadbeat dad, his mother was a prostitute, and he was orphaned by the age of 12. He was an outspoken, boisterous young man who was known to speak back to authority. And he was a ladies' man who struggled with marital fidelity. So throughout the musical, as the audience is reeled deeper and deeper into Hamilton's story, they're forced to challenge their assumptions about what a founding father is supposed to look like. In creating this work, Lin-Manuel Miranda transcends boundaries our society rarely dares to traverse. The show invites diverse faces and voices to enter Broadway, a historically and still predominantly white space. Miranda takes genres of music that pride themselves on being the heart of street culture and seamlessly fits them into the place of high culture. The musical crafts an intersection between revolution and revolution, the American Revolution, the often whitewashed narrative fundamental in shaping our country's character, culture, and values. Hip-hop, the revolutionary genre of music that has shaped the character, culture, and values of many modern African Americans and Hispanic Americans. Hamilton not only crafts a conversation between cultures that do not usually interact, it succeeds in bringing these worlds together at a time when our nation is divided on almost everything. The show made its first off-Broadway appearance in 2015. 2015, the first year on record when there were more people in this country living below the poverty line or in upper-income homes than there were in the middle class. The year we saw radical Islamic terrorism in San Bernardino and the terrorism of white supremacy in Charleston as a young man killed 9 African Americans praying in their church. 2015, a year when our country experienced race riots, when Freddie Gray of Baltimore and Sam DuBose here in our own city died at the hands of police officers. By every reasonable measure, looking at the world in 2015, Hamilton should not have succeeded. But it did. The show won 11 Tonys, a Grammy, and a Pulitzer Prize. It was a universal crowd pleaser, and perhaps the only thing Madonna, Stephen Sondheim, Rupert Murdoch, and Dick Cheney will all openly agree on. So why did Hamilton succeed? And what can its success teach us about navigating the polarized world we live in today? In his own words, Lin-Manuel Miranda suggests that the success of the show is the way it pulls you into the story. Quote, allowing you to leave whatever cultural baggage you have about the founding fathers at the door. In our own lives, how often is cultural baggage a barrier that prevents us from having meaningful interactions with those who are different than us, or to truly engage with those who are different on difficult topics? We get stuck in feeling like we don't have the right language to talk to people from different backgrounds, or we hold back in fear of saying something that sounds ignorant or offensive, or we worry about the assumptions others might have about us. I remember my first day of college, meeting my roommate and learning she was Palestinian and had been raised in a refugee camp in Lebanon. In my angst to say the right thing and my fear over what she would perceive me as, knowing that I was Jewish, I struggled to find the right words, and I quickly fell into incoherent babbling. I'm still embarrassed about it. I said something like, "Wow, you don't meet a Palestinian every day." Well, I guess you do because you are one, but what I'm trying to say is nice to meet you. Now, those aren't the only ways that cultural baggage comes into play. We know we live in a world where there's prejudice and injustice, but we don't always know where we fit in the historical narrative. We are afraid to acknowledge our privilege and are afraid that our privilege will undermine the oppression we still experience. Often in Jewish spaces, I hear people say, "Well, yeah, I may look white, but I'm not white, I'm Jewish." Or, "Yes, I'm well off now, but my ancestors came to this country with nothing." As famous author Roxane Gay writes, quote, "We tend to believe that accusations of privilege imply we have it easy. And because life is hard for nearly everyone, we resent hearing that." But she goes on to remind readers that to have privilege in one or more areas of life does not mean you are wholly privileged. To acknowledge privilege is not a denial of the ways you are marginalized, the ways you have suffered. Personally, unlike Rabbi Bar, who, as we heard last night, doesn't quite have the details of his family history in line, I have a strong sense of where I come from, my family history. And there are times when my history becomes cultural baggage that prevents me from having true empathy for others. There are moments when my peers come to me with problems, and my internal voice tunes out their very real pain. When I should be feeling empathy, my own internal voice says, "Really? My ancestors survived slavery and the Holocaust. How can you expect me to have pity for you in face of such a minor setback?" But it's the voice of this baggage that keeps me from truly having a meaningful conversation with them and understanding the choices they make. How often does the voice of our cultural baggage keep us from having meaningful conversations with those who are different than us? In Hamilton, the answer to cultural baggage is a captivating story. The power of story is that it can draw us out of ourselves. It can evoke emotions and take us to places we would not otherwise go. In our daily lives, is this something we can achieve? Without catchy musical numbers, gripping dance moves, and clever lyrics, is it possible for us to experience this temporary suspension of our fears? This momentary extension of ourselves deeper into the narrative of someone else. We don't walk into conversations with other people with the same buy-in as when we walk in to see a play. When I'm in a theater, I expect to sit back and let the show wash over me. But if I'm being honest, I'm not sure how often I truly even listen to the stories of others, much less allow myself to get lost in them. I listen to hear their stories and figure out what we have in common. Habitually, when I ask someone a simple question, "Where are you from?" or "How was your weekend?" the moment they open their mouth, my brain is off at full speed, trying to figure out something we have in common, trying to relate what they have to say back to me. And usually, at least superficially, it works. Neither of us has to feel uncomfortable. We found common ground. It is more comfortable to ignore our baggage and our differences, even if they are staring us blatantly in the face. I use myself as an example here, but I have a feeling many of us fall into this trap. What would we have to give of ourselves to suspend our inhibitions and our desires to find commonalities with others? If we changed the way we listen, what would we learn? Perhaps this would help us overcome divisions that keep us from meaningfully interacting with people who are different than us. Clearly, I agree with Lin-Manuel Miranda's reflection on what makes his show such a success. But I think there is more to the success than this. At the point of intersection of all the cultural norms Miranda transcends, he makes a profound statement. The statement that all of us in America, regardless of race, culture, or country of origin, own an integral part of American history. So we all have a powerful role to play in shaping the nation's future. Perhaps instead of seeking unity to avoid the discomfort of difference, this is where we should be empowered to find unity, in a sense of common pride and responsibility for our shared well-being. Within the show itself, this message of empowerment may appear most pointedly in a scene depicting the eve of the Battle of Yorktown. Now, the Battle of Yorktown would go on to be the final decisive campaign in securing our victory in the War of Independence. As General Washington appoints Alexander Hamilton to the position of commanding general, he sings a short ballad. Washington sings to Hamilton, "Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story, but history has its eyes on you." You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story, but history has its eyes on you. Today on Rosh Hashanah, we gather to affirm this truth. The truth that history has its eyes on each and every one of us and on this community. Today, we affirm that the power to change the world is in our hands. History will tell how well we did our part, how we overcame or succumbed to a world of division. What will your legacy be? Today and every day, may we ask ourselves these questions and push ourselves to truly engage with others before it's too late. May you have a Shana Tova, a good year of truly hearing and being heard, and may the generations who come after you find empowerment in your story. Shana Tova.